My name is Charlotte. I am 32, and last spring I signed closing papers on a beige duplex that nobody in my family knew about. I turned the new key, smelled paint and sawdust, and listened to the quiet settle like a blanket. I wanted a beginning that belonged to me. Then I learned my parents had other plans. They expected my brother, his wife, and their children to live there for free. Before we begin, tell me where you are listening from. Please like and subscribe. I work as a project coordinator at a community hospital in a coastal town where the wind whistles across the parking lot and coffee is always burnt by noon. The job is steady. The benefits are decent. The pay is not glamorous, but I learned to stretch each paycheck into something that resembled a future. I was born into a family where saving was a sport and spending was a confession. For years, I paid off a student loan in small bites, brought my lunch in a reused container, and watched the housing market like a hawk waiting for a clean shot. When the duplex came up, old siding, sturdy bones, and a price I could manage, I felt something inside me sit up and breathe. The duplex sits on a quiet street near a park, with swing sets that sing when the wind gets loud. 2 doors, 2 mailboxes, a shared rectangle of lawn that turns gold in August. I imagined living in one side and renting the other to a tenant who would treat the place with care. The numbers penciled out. If I kept my side simple, if I found a reliable tenant for the second unit, I could make the mortgage and tuck a little money away every month. It felt like the kind of decision you make when you finally trust yourself. I did not announce it to my parents because in my family announcements turn into committees. My mother likes to weigh every choice until it is no longer a choice. My father calls it prudence. It has never felt like prudence to me. It has felt like a slow erosion of the person who brought the idea forward in the first place. I did not want erosion. I wanted a key I could hold in my palm and a door that opened when I turned it. On the day I took possession, the property manager handed me a ring of metal that jingled like luck. I walked through each room with that happy kind of careful, the kind where your steps are light but your hands test every window latch. The paint smelled like lemons. The blinds clapped softly when I passed. In my unit, the living room is a modest square with a window that looks out on a sycamore tree and a thin slice of sky. I placed my single lamp, the one I bought when I first moved out for college, near the window. That lamp has followed me through every apartment, a slender companion with a linen shade that throws a warm pool onto the floor. I clicked it on even though daylight still filled the rooms. The glow was small and steady. For once, that was enough. I ordered a sandwich to celebrate and ate cross-legged on the bare floor, napkins spread neatly beside me. I thought about furniture, but not too hard. I did not want a room that had been decided by someone else's taste. I wanted to listen to the space and choose slowly. I wanted to save money by finding pieces that would last and not regret them in 3 months. On a notepad, I wrote a list. Dishes, a second-hand sofa, curtain rods, a quiet rug. The list looked like a promise to myself. Growing up, my brother Ethan required a lot of attention. He was charming and messy, good with crowds, bad with deadlines. He could draw a portrait in 10 minutes, sing in perfect pitch, and forget to pay his phone bill for 3 months. My parents adored his brightness. They worried about his future. They did not worry about mine. I was the child who found a way. I was the child who could fix a schedule, make a dent in a debt, find a used car that still had a heart. When I say that I learned not to share my bright ideas, it is because I learned that sharing them means watching them get adopted by the family, renamed, and redirected toward Ethan. Now, I had a piece of earth where my name lived on the deed. I planned to find a tenant who worked nearby so parking would not be a war. I planned to write a simple lease with clear boundaries. I planned to window shop for a dining table that could fold down when I wanted the living room to breathe. In my head, everything unfolded in gentle steps. My hope was quiet, but it was not fragile. It was the kind of hope that comes after years of scraping, the kind that puts both feet down and says this will hold. I slept the first night on a borrowed mattress placed on the floor. The hospital's early shift called me before dawn. I woke up with light coming in around the edges of the blinds and the smell of fresh paint still in the room. I brushed my teeth in a bathroom with gray tile. I made coffee in a machine that sputtered like a small engine. I stood by the window, hands wrapped around a cup, and let myself feel the life I had started. It did not look like much from the outside. To me, it looked like a door I could finally close, and a door I could thoughtfully open. The first family gathering after I bought the duplex was a Sunday lunch at my parents' house. My mother sets the table with a seriousness that feels like ceremony. Napkins folded into crisp triangles. Glasses that clink politely when you move them. There is always a roast and always bread that someone pretends not to eat. Ethan and his wife Lauren arrived with their 2 kids, Oliver and June, dragging jackets and chatter into the dining room. My father handed me a plate piled too high and told me I looked thin. He always says that. I always am the same size. I had not yet told them where I lived. I had said only that I found a place that worked for my budget and my commute. I thought I would offer details slowly, maybe bring them to see it when it was ready. But news in our family moves like water. It finds every crack. Somewhere between the potatoes and the green beans, Lauren said the word duplex. She said it brightly, like a solution. She said it with a smile I did not know how to answer. A hush fell over my own thoughts. My mother put down the gravy spoon and glanced at my father. That glance said, "We have been discussing this." My father cleared his throat and asked me about the layout. He asked if there was a yard. He asked which side had the better light. He asked questions like a man who is about to allocate resources that belong to him. Ethan buttered a roll and laughed at something the kids said, as if none of this involved him at all. Then Lauren said the part that opened a small, cold window inside me. She said the duplex would be perfect for the children. She said it would be great to be near family. She said their lease was up in 2 months and they were looking for something quiet. She said it in the tone people use when they are sliding into a seat that they think was saved for them. I tried to find footing. I said I had not planned on roommates. My mother patted my hand and told me not to be dramatic. My father said family helps family. Ethan finally looked up and said he would handle the yard work. He said it like a gift he would give occasionally when the mood struck. My throat tightened. I watched June spill milk and Oliver ask for more bread. I watched my mother wipe the table as if she was already cleaning up a house we all shared. After lunch, my parents were kind in that way, that is a kind of pressure. My mother took me aside and told me she was proud of me, then immediately began planning out loud. She described how she could help arrange the rooms so the kids could nap peacefully. She wondered out loud where the playpen might fit. My father talked about splitting utilities as if the numbers were already on his desk. He used the word we. We could figure that out. We could make it fair. He never asked me what I wanted. The conversation was so smooth, you could have skated on it. I stood in the kitchen holding a dish towel and felt my own voice go quiet. It has a habit of doing that when I feel outnumbered. The duplex that had held so much peace began to feel like a stage where a play was being rehearsed without my permission. I went home that night and walked from room to room and tried to feel the old warmth. The lamp was still lit. The pool of light was still calm. But something inside me was unsettled, like a picture that hangs slightly crooked no matter how many times you straighten it. I told myself I would correct the misunderstanding the next time we spoke. I told myself I would explain gently and firmly, that I planned to rent to a paying tenant. I told myself I would remind them that I had budgeted carefully and that free was not in the numbers. I made tea. I sat by the window with my notepad. I wrote down sentences I could use. Then I flipped the page and started making a list of repairs I needed to finish before I could show the unit. If I prepared the space, maybe the space would help me say what I needed to say. The next week, I began looking for a tenant quietly. I told a nurse from the hospital about it, a woman named Teresa, who had been looking for a place near her clinic. I set up a time for her to see the unit. I told no one in my family. I was still hoping for an easy path out of a conversation that felt like it would tangle me up for months. Hope can be stubborn that way. It believes there is a gentle door even after you have walked into a wall. The pressure did not arrive as a storm. It arrived as a series of polite assumptions. Ethan texted me a measure of the kids' bunk beds. He asked if the back bedroom would accommodate them. I stared at my phone for a long time and did not type. Lauren sent me a link to a curtain she liked, dusty blue with small stars. She wrote that June would sleep better in a room with soft light. She added a heart at the end of the message. I put the phone down without responding and made a grocery list I did not need. My parents began speaking as if the decision had been made by consensus. My mother told Aunt Marie that it was a blessing that the family would be clustered again. She used phrases like new chapter. My father ran numbers out loud at the Sunday table. He said Ethan would cover lawn maintenance and trash and minor repairs, and that should count as rent for the first year. He looked at me when he said it, as if he had just read a verdict and expected me to nod. I folded my napkin carefully and drank water I did not want. My own work at the Duplex became a set of small defenses. I spent weeknights patching nail holes in the spare unit and weekends repainting the trim. I borrowed a wet-dry vacuum from a neighbor and cleaned the old carpet until it smelled like a sunny afternoon. I left my phone in the kitchen drawer so the messages could pile up without answering. I kept telling myself I would schedule a talk. I kept telling myself I would pick a day and say the truth and let everyone feel whatever they would feel. But I kept sanding and painting and fixing, as if the finish line was a door I could walk through and have it all make sense. One evening, I came home and found a small box on the porch. Inside were plastic plates with cartoon animals and a note from my mother about how little hands drop things. There was also a roll of colorful decals shaped like planets. June loves space, she wrote in her neat handwriting. I sat on the steps and held the decals and felt anger and sadness and a wave of tiredness that had little to do with paint fumes. I set the box in the hallway unopened, where it leaned against the wall like a decision for someone else to make. Days passed, and it gathered a light coat of dust. Every time I stepped over it, I felt that same tilt inside me. When Teresa, the nurse, walked through the unit, she was quiet and respectful. She peered into closets without touching things. She asked a few practical questions. She told me she worked early mornings and would not have parties. She did not try to negotiate me down to an impossible number. When she left, she said thank you in a way that made me feel seen. I printed an application and slid it into a folder. Then I stared at the folder and thought of Ethan's text about the bunk beds. I thought of my father saying we. I imagined the conversation that waited for me like a road with a steep grade. My parents stopped by one Saturday without calling. They have keys to my car, to their house, and now they wanted a key to my new life. I met them on the porch and said I was in the middle of something. My father craned his neck to see into the living room. My mother held a bag of groceries and asked where to put the ice cream. She talked about the kids needing a place to nap when they visited. I stood there with my hands on my hips and could hear my own heartbeat. Instead of saying what I needed to say, I led them to my kitchen and cleared a space on the counter. We drank coffee at the tiny table I had found at a thrift store. My mother talked about how June gets carsick and how it would be so nice for Lauren if she did not have to commute anymore. My father said he could help me put in a fence to separate the yards. He smiled as if he had solved a puzzle that once seemed complicated. When they left, the house felt smaller. I picked up the bag of groceries and found a set of measuring spoons tucked in beside the ice cream. A little housewarming gift, the note said. The spoons were cheerful and red. I placed them in a drawer and cried in the quiet. Not because of spoons, but because of the way a small thing can make a boundary feel like it has already been crossed. I called Teresa and asked if she was still interested. She was. I told her I needed a couple more weeks to finish the bathroom. She said no problem. I hung up and made a list of what remained. Caulk the tub, replace the shower head, tighten the doorknob on the hall closet. It felt good to write things that I could fix. I put on old clothes and scrubbed until the shine came back to the fixtures. I told myself that finishing the unit would make the next part easier. Maybe if the place was fully ready, I would feel ready too. That night, I dragged the box of plates and decals into a closet and closed the door. The hallway looked cleaner without it. The space did not tilt. It felt like a small correction made with a steady hand. 2 weeks later, on a bright Saturday that smelled like cut grass, Teresa came by with her references and a cashier's check for the deposit. We stood in the doorway of the second unit and went through the lease line by line. I explained the trash day rules and where to park so the sycamore did not cover her windshield with sticky seeds in spring. She nodded and asked thoughtful questions. I felt calm. I felt like a person running her own life. Halfway through our conversation, I heard the sound of a familiar engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. My heart sank before my mind caught up. My parents' car rolled slowly past the front window, then eased into the curb as if the street had been reserved. Ethan and Lauren followed behind in their van, with the kids pressed against the rear windows, faces round and expectant. Teresa looked at me with eyebrows raised. I smiled too quickly and said that my family must be out for a drive. They did not just drive by. They arrived. They tumbled out in a flurry of voices and questions as if the house had called to them. My mother waved when she saw me in the doorway. My father came up the walk like a man greeting his own porch. Ethan jogged the last few steps and held out a tape measure like a joke. Lauren called to June to hold her brother's hand. The kids broke free and sprinted across the lawn to see the backyard, their laughter echoing. I stood there with Teresa and felt the place shift under my feet. My father asked if they could take a quick look. Quick looks are never quick. I said I was in the middle of something. My mother said it would just be a moment. Teresa glanced at me as if to ask if she should leave. I told her it was fine and that we could step outside for some air. But my family had already crossed the threshold. My parents moved through the living room while Ethan stretched a metal tape from one wall to the next, calling out numbers and nodding like a contractor in a hurry. Lauren opened a cabinet and made an approving sound. The kids ran down the hall and picked bedrooms without asking, their voices full of a happiness that made me ache in a way I did not expect. Teresa stood quietly on the porch and looked at the sky. I joined her and tried to breathe evenly. She said softly that she did not want to be in the way. I said this was not her problem. Inside, my mother commented on the condition of the stove, then asked me if we should replace it before the kids moved in. My father opened the back door and called to Ethan about the shed. The scene had a surreal quality, like watching actors perform a play where you recognize all the lines, but never agreed to be in the cast. I told my mother that I had a plan for the unit. She smiled at me as if I were a child refusing a nap. She said my plan could adapt. She said family first. Behind her, Ethan took a picture of the back bedroom and sent it to Lauren, who was in the hallway measuring the linen closet with the same tape. Teresa shifted her weight on the porch and checked her watch. That was the moment something inside me reached a limit I had not known was there. I asked everyone to step outside for a minute. My voice did not rise. It did not shake. It came out even and firm, and it was the steadiness that finally made my mother look up with a small frown. My father walked out with the confident stride of a man who believes he will be convinced. Ethan put the tape in his pocket and followed. On the porch, I said the unit was already spoken for. My father laughed, thinking I was making a joke to ease tension. I did not smile. I introduced Teresa. I said she had come with a deposit and references. I said we were finishing the lease. My mother opened her mouth to protest, then shut it. Ethan looked at the kids playing by the sycamore and did not meet my eyes. Lauren put a hand on his arm as if to hold him in place. The kids were still laughing. The day was still sunny. The air smelled like grass and the neighbor's barbecue. The world did not change, but the feeling in my chest did. Even then, I softened. I told everyone I would call later and explain more. I told Teresa we would finish inside after I walked my family to their cars. Teresa nodded and offered to wait down the street. She shook my hand and said she appreciated my clarity. It was a sentence that made me feel like a person who could take care of what was hers. I walked my parents and Ethan back to the curb. My father stared at the house like a man who has misplaced something he was sure belonged to him. My mother started to cry in that quiet way she does when she does not get her way and needs the room to rearrange itself around her. Ethan said they had expected a different outcome. Lauren said they had already told the kids. I told them I had never agreed. I told them free was not an option. I told them I loved them and I was not a rescue plan. They left with engines loud and windows down. The kids waved, not understanding. I stood on the sidewalk and let the sound of the cars fade. Inside, Teresa and I sat on the floor and finished the lease. I did not sleep much the week after the drive-by. Family group text messages flared and cooled like small stove burners. My mother asked me to reconsider. My father sent numbers and a timeline and a list of reasons. Ethan sent a link to a bunk bed with safety rails. Lauren sent a picture of June holding a crayon drawing of a house with 2 front doors. I ignored the messages for a day, then 2. On the 3rd day, my mother called and left a voicemail that was mostly silence and breathing. I saved it without listening again. I went to work, answered emails, scheduled equipment deliveries, and spoke in a calm voice to surgeons who wanted competing rooms at the same time. At lunch, I drove to a copy shop and printed 2 sets of the lease on heavy paper. I bought a simple folder and a pack of adhesive notes. I am good at preparations. I laid everything out on my kitchen table and highlighted the parts that mattered to me. Rent due dates, quiet hours, the clause that states the lease cannot be transferred without written permission. I placed the signed copy in the folder and felt the small relief that comes when you name a decision on paper. My father invited everyone to dinner the following Sunday. He used the word family meeting. I brought a salad and the folder and a calm I had practiced in the mirror. When I walked in, the table was set with the same seriousness as always. My mother wore her pearl earrings. Ethan fidgeted with a napkin. Lauren kept smoothing June's hair as if that could smooth the moment. The air felt charged, but the room looked normal. That is how family conflict often is, a thunderstorm in a house with the curtains drawn. We ate quietly. My mother asked about work. My father asked if my car needed new tires. Ethan told a story about Oliver's science project. Everyone kept to safe topics, like swimmers keeping their heads above water. Finally, my father set his fork down and folded his hands. He announced that they had been talking, and that moving day would be the 2nd Saturday of next month. He said they would arrange a truck. He said they appreciated my generosity. He said all of this in a tone that suggested the matter had been decided by a committee that met while I was elsewhere. I reached into my bag and placed the folder on the table. I slid it toward the center where the serving bowl had been. The sky outside was turning the color of metal. The room went quiet as soon as the folder landed. It made a small sound, like a soft tap on a door. I said the unit was rented. I said the lease had been signed. I said the tenant would move in on the 1st of the month. I said the agreement was legal and binding. My voice did not waver. I looked at each of them, one by one, not challenging, simply present. My mother's face moved through confusion, hurt, and anger in quick succession. My father picked up the folder as if it might burn him. Ethan leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Lauren stared at the table. No one reached for the salad. No one made a joke. The quiet had weight. My father asked why I had done this. The words sat in the air like a test. I told him I had worked for years to position myself to buy a place. I told him I planned it down to the numbers and that the rent was part of the plan. I told him I was not able to give away what I had barely secured. My mother said, family should not charge family. I said I had not offered a discount, never mind free. I said my silence was not consent. I said they had begun planning a life in my rooms without asking me a single question. Ethan said they had assumed. I said assumptions are heavy when someone else has to carry them. Lauren whispered that they had told the kids already. I said I was sorry. I said I had never agreed. My father accused me of selfishness. The word hit the table and sounded like a plate set down too hard. I took a breath. I said I had lived my entire life as the child who could figure it out. I said I had watched attention and resources funnel toward Ethan because he struggled in ways I did not. I said I had developed skills and independence because no one was guarding my path, and I learned to guard it myself. I said this was not selfishness. This was stewardship. The word seemed to surprise even me. Stewardship. It felt accurate. It felt like holding something that you are responsible for and making sure it does not slip away because someone else is louder or sadder in the moment. My mother began to cry. My father went quiet in that way he does when he recognizes a point he cannot argue without losing ground. Ethan said nothing for a long time. Then, finally, he looked at me and said he understood why I did it, but he wished I had said it sooner. I told him I had tried, then stopped, then tried again. Sometimes the effort is invisible to people who are not looking. Then I did something I had not planned. I asked Ethan if he wanted help looking for a place. I told him I knew a few landlords who kept decent rentals at fair prices. I told him I would make a few calls. It did not change what I had decided. It was a hand stretched across a gap without giving away my ground. The room softened a little. Lauren nodded without speaking. My father closed the folder. My mother removed her napkin from her lap and pressed it under her eyes carefully to catch tears before they touched her skin. We cleared the table. No one spoke loudly. No one stormed. It was not the kind of confrontation that tears plaster off the walls. It was the kind that rearranges the furniture of how people think about you. I left with my dish and the calm that comes after a hard thing is said, and the world has not ended. The sky outside had gone fully dark. I drove home with the radio off and a sense that something important had settled into its rightful place. The next few weeks felt like the quiet after fireworks. There is still smoke in the air, and the shapes of light still float behind your eyes, but the night has gone back to being a night. Ethan did not call. Lauren sent a brief text thanking me for the landlord leads. My mother switched to emails with recipes and funny animal pictures, a soft retreat she uses when she wants to reset the room. My father forwarded an article about the housing market and added a line about how things are hard for everyone. I wrote back short, polite replies. On the first of the month, Teresa moved in. She carried boxes in with a friend and kept her voice low while they worked. She gave me a small fern in a clay pot as a thank you. I set it on my kitchen windowsill and promised to water it on Saturdays. That first evening, a small envelope slid under my door. It held a check for the first month's rent and a note that said the place already felt like home. I held the check and the note and focused on my breath. Air in, air out. This is what stability feels like when you have earned it with years of small choices. The duplex became a rhythm. Trash day on Tuesday, quiet after 10, a lawn to mow that smelled like summer when I finished. I took a slow victory in ordinary things. A clean sink. A rug finally chosen after weeks of patient searching. A table that fit the corner like it had been made for it. I kept the folder with the lease in a drawer and almost never looked at it. The paper had done its work. The boundary was not a wall I had to patrol constantly. It was a truth we all now knew, even if some of us did not like it. The loneliness that followed surprised me. I thought I would feel only relief. Relief was there, but there was also a hollow space where the old closeness had been. Family is complicated that way. You can be hurt and still miss the noise. You can crave quiet and still feel ache when the phone stays stubbornly still on a Sunday afternoon. I did not fill the ache with excuses or extra work. I let it be a reminder that I had chosen something that would take time to settle across all the rooms of my life. I walked in the park some evenings and watched the sun slide down behind the trees. Children swung high. Dogs chased balls with reckless joy. A few times I saw Ethan's van in a different neighborhood across town and wondered if he had found a place. I did not call him from the car. I waited until I got home, then sent him a short message asking how the search was going. He replied that they were looking at a small house near the elementary school. He thanked me for the landlord names. He used a period instead of a smiley face. It felt like progress. Months pass in the way that ordinary months do, marked by utility bills and holiday weekends and the smell of cinnamon near the end of the year. Ethan and Lauren found a rental that is not as convenient as my duplex would have been. They learned the bus route. They painted a room soft yellow and posted a picture of June holding a stuffed rabbit in the window. My mother stopped sending recipe emails and returned to invitations for Sunday dinner. The first evening I accepted, the table felt familiar again. The tension did not vanish. It changed shape. It became something we could move around without stubbing our toes. My father talks to me differently now. He asks questions that sound like questions. He does not announce plans and call them favors. He still worries about Ethan. He always will. But he looks at me with a recognition that was missing before. He sees me as someone who holds a key and decides how to use it. My mother is slower to adjust. She still thinks love looks like proximity and shared casseroles. I think love sometimes looks like a door that clicks shut and a light that comes on behind it because you have chosen rest. I turn on my old lamp most nights when I get home. The linen shade throws a warm circle onto the floor. I sit on the rug with my back against the sofa and read or listen to the neighbors' wind chimes move in the coastal air. Sometimes I think about the afternoon when cars lined the curb and the porch filled with people who thought the house was theirs. Sometimes I think about the folder on the table at my parents' house and the silence that followed. I do not replay the scenes to scold anyone. I revisit them to remember what it felt like to meet myself in the middle of a room and stay. If there is a lesson here, it is not a neat one. It is not about winning or losing a fight. It is about choosing stewardship over resentment and responsibility over a quick piece that costs too much. It is about the humility that comes from saying no and the courage that comes from saying it before your voice shakes, or even while it shakes. It is about understanding that family is a map you continue to redraw as you learn the shape of your own life. The duplex taught me that my best decisions often begin with quiet, then they meet pressure, then they meet a moment where you lay out the paper and the ink and set your name where it belongs. There is a satisfaction in living with consequences that you chose. There is a steadiness in cooking pasta in your own kitchen and watering a small fern on Saturdays because you promised yourself you would. I am not the hero of a dramatic story. I am a woman who saved, who signed, who learned to say what she means, even when it was inconvenient for people she loves. The family did not fall apart. It did not transform instantly either. It adjusted in the slow, ordinary way that living things do. That is enough for me. Before you go, I would love to know if this story touched on anything you have lived. Have you ever drawn a line that protected your peace, even when it disappointed someone you care about? Share your experience in the comments. Tell me where you are listening from, and if this resonated, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a gentle push toward their own boundary. Thank you for being here, and I wish you a week with good light, clear decisions, and a door that opens and closes when you want it to.